You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Kind of getting back into the swing of things. I appreciate everybody's patience. Like I said, I don't know if it was on the main show, I think it was, but I've got a new job and I'm just kind of been readjusting to a new life after 11 years of my last employer. I kind of had things arranged a certain way. And then you go get a new job and then you've got to figure out whole new schedules and all that junk. But we're back in the saddle. Interesting times. Has anything happened while I've been gone? Anything different? Place looks like you've rearranged a little bit. Man, it's hard to keep up. Like you take a month off and then you've got to get back into the swing of things. It's really difficult to go, wait, all right, I didn't read the news for a month. What the heck happened? And I think a lot of this is by design. You know, Trump is doing so many things, and it's hard to keep up. And I think what that does is that creates this sense of overwhelming. So you just don't even try to wade in. You don't start. You don't. You just give up and let them do whatever they're going to do because there's nothing you can do to affect it. That's not how we tend to look at things here at the Chris Spangle Show. We try to understand what's going on. I will say I've never felt less educated. I've never felt less informed in my life. I think that's just a function of becoming a mature person. I think as you grow up and you try to understand the world, or you get out into the world and have different experiences, you start to understand that the more you learn, the less you know. That you are ignorant of certain things. I am just an ignorant person. Like I have an idea of what USAID does. I don't really know. We can get rid of the Department of Education, cool. But I couldn't like give a lecture on what the Department of Education actually does, right? So I think the hard part about forming an actual opinion about things is understanding that you don't know what you're talking about half the time. And I think it's especially, it's February, so I've got a cold. I have not lost my voice yet this year, which has been great. I mean, I couldn't speak for all of January last year, but I can't take the sickness anymore. I don't know why I live here. I hate the weather. It's February 6th today. If it doesn't start getting sunny and warm, I'm going to have a problem. But yeah, the reality of what's going on right now is you've got to try to understand what's going on, even if it feels very overwhelming. Because I think first you have to understand. It's part of like being an adult is understanding the news. It's like paying your bills and brushing your teeth. You just should make an effort to be somewhat informed. But I also think there's a point where you have to disconnect a little bit and go, look, I can't know everything. And so I have not found that balance in my life of like how far do I wade in to understand everybody's point of view, and do I have the right theory of the case and the left theory of the case, and you just do the best you can while looking after the things that you're supposed to look after. But so on this point, I saw on Instagram Roy Wood Jr. being interviewed by the LA Times, And I thought he gave some great advice that I wanted to share with you about figuring out how and when to ingest information, because the onslaught of information, yes, Trump's speed has something to do with it, but I think you have to understand in the world of AI, this is not going back. Like, we're not going back to a time where there just wasn't this giant. We watched Willy Wonka the other day, the original one, where Mike TV gets sent in bits over their heads into the little TV. And it's that, right? Like, it just feels like that stream is just going to get bigger and more intense as AI comes in. And you're just going to have to choose how to take in your information. I mean, for me, I started getting the print paper. I get 3 local papers, IBJ, obviously, the Indy Star, the Indianapolis Recorder. I also get the Wall Street Journal delivered to my house, and I like reading the print. I get print magazines. I like having something in my hand as I read it. And I think that really helps me kind of just go, all right, my news ingestion, as long as I just get the couple papers, I've got some local, I've got some national, that really helps, because so much of what you see online is just so slanted. But here's Roy Wood Jr.'s advice on ingesting news.
Very intentional about when you decide to consume the things that you feel are corroding your piece. There's going to be a volume of news and information. Some of it is to inform you, some of it is deliberately to emotionally affect you. So you have to start recognizing the difference between the two. But I think for me, the thing that's helped me the most in the last 2 years, like, if we just go since leaving Daily Show, I watch local news, I read a paper. 9 times out of 10, if you ingest your news through reading, there's a lot less of a slant to it, just simply in how you ingest copy versus how you listen to someone talk to you. If news is bothering you, you still need to get information, switch to reading instead of the television, and deliberately connect with the things that make you happy or bring you joy, or like when your mood is altered for a positive, denote those things that happen. What did you eat? Where did you go? Who did you talk to? Like, those are all catalysts for that emotion, and just repeat that. And I think that's the most rudimentary way to start in terms of, figuring things out. I just think it's going to be a very interesting times ahead. And I think that's why, films like this matter. You can legislate DE&I and all of the whatever anti-diversity out of every government building. But in the creative space, we have the power. And so these stories matter. So find the things that matter to you as well, and just ingest the stuff that contributes to your piece.
I think that's a great point of, like, your piece is worth something. In our house, when tantrums start, we just look at the 6-year-old and say, look, you're not going to disturb the peace of this household. And I have to tell that to me, because I'm the one that disturbs the peace more than anybody else. So not putting it on the 6-year-old altogether. But yeah, I just think peace is such an underrated personal value these days, because we're always chasing after the next thing to disturb our peace. It's been difficult to kind of get back into the swing of things, because so much is happening. So every time I plan for a show, the Trump years, the first time, I feel like we've all forgot what it was like when he was president, where everybody's all mad about everything all the time and stressed out. And now we're back again going, we really are going to do this for 4 more years. So every time I start to put a show together, it's dated, because we're on something different. And I had forgotten that from the first term, because with Biden, it was kind of back to standard 3-day news cycles. And now it's 3-hour news cycles again. And so I just think, as like a weekly podcast, I can up the frequency a little bit, but there's no way to be complete in covering everything that's going on. Just kind of picking out the points where I think things are important. And the first thing I want to talk about is TikTok. I think it's kind of disturbing that the Congress has said that TikTok is to be banned, and Biden and Trump and the presidency said, we disagree. We're just not going to enforce the law. That's a really bad sign for where the Constitution is, where the state of the rule of law is in our nation. And I think it's a great illustration of how it's not just one side. I certainly think there's an all-out assault on Congress and the court's authorities and independent agencies within the executive branch and things like Inspector General's ability to curb lawlessness or just the executive doing whatever they want to do. I'm not making this a Trump thing. I mean, obviously he's the one driving it, but just thinking from a political structure and how we actually, this is something we've talked about forever on this show, how the rule of law actually works and how it's supposed to work and how we need to be really focusing on political power, who has it and how it is exercised. Because that is the fundamental thing about being a libertarian, is understanding political power and its uses and finding ways to limit and disperse that political power. These are incredibly important things in terms of setting up a government and how it should operate. And TikTok just operating within the United States after I don't agree with the law that we'll get into the basics here. I don't agree with the law, but once the law is set, it's not a matter of me disagreeing or agreeing. Like, who are we going to follow? If you're TikTok, are you going to follow President Biden and Trump and just do what they say? Or are you recognizing Congress's authority and what they're saying? This is a really interesting test case here about where we're going and Congress's power, which is supposed to be the most powerful of the co-equal branches. I know. So I wanted to bring on Ed Tarnowski, who is a writer. He wrote a piece in Real Clear Politics to talk a little bit about this. He's a Policy and Advocacy Director at EdChoice and host of the State of Choice podcast at EdChoice. He leads the organization's advocacy efforts on national policy in certain parts of the country, and he's a Young Voices contributor. But Ed does a great job of explaining what is TikTok, why has this been banned, why is this troubling from a viewpoint of the rule of law, and I think you'll find it really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can go to chrisspangle.com and leave a comment there on that, or hit me up at chris@chrisspangle.com. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk to Ed Tarnowski. Welcome to the show, Ed. I really appreciate you being here.
It's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
So let's go back to the beginning. Obviously, everybody understands TikTok. I mean, we'll just make that assumption right now. But who owns TikTok?
All right. I mean, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a company based in China. And companies based in China are obligated to fulfill any request made by the Chinese Communist Party, including for data or manipulation of an algorithm, for example.
Okay, so when people say that this is basically Chinese spyware, they mean it literally.
They do mean it literally. And we've seen it been used against journalists in a very literal way already. There's evidence to suggest that. But spyware, and then, of course, now you see more recently the manipulation of the algorithm as well in some of the research that's out there.
Yeah, my wife used to teach Chinese or English to Chinese kids through something called VIP Kid before the Chinese government shut them down. And it was interesting to hear how different their TikTok was for their kids, full of STEM information, history, Chinese history, very nationalistic, versus what we get fed, which is celebrities, a lot of like cotton candy stuff in terms of what we're actually fed versus what the Chinese people are.
Well, that's right. And the TikTok that we get in the United States is essentially banned in China. And you're absolutely right. Their version is full of course, nationalist propaganda, but then also stuff related to STEM and education. So, they're feeding people in America quite a different experience.
So, how did the ball get rolling on banning TikTok? Who got that ball rolling?
Right. Well, originally started back in I think it was around 2020 or 2021. I believe it was 2020. And it was actually the first Trump administration that kind of floated this idea that they issued some kind of action from the executive setting the stage for a forced sale of TikTok. Fast forward way in the future, last year, there was talk in Congress about doing this. It was eventually put into a larger national security bill. And the bill essentially said, which became law, TikTok had until January 19th. But I should say ByteDance had until January 19th to divest TikTok, and basically for TikTok to be sold to an American company. They did not obviously do that by January 19th. So it kind of the ball got rolling in Congress. It was signed into law, I believe, late last summer or early last fall, in a large bipartisan effort.
Yeah, so a law is passed by Congress to force them to sell. Now, do they have to sell the whole company of TikTok, or is it just whatever operates in the United States?
No, yeah, all of TikTok is the law requires that TikTok be completely divested from ByteDance, and any Chinese company.
So see, I look at this like the smoking bans, right? Like I recognize the job loss and the moral quandary of the I'm not that sad if TikTok goes away, but I don't understand how the United States government can tell a Chinese-based company that they have to be forced to sell. That seems like a really bad precedent, just from a libertarian perspective.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, and this has actually happened before. So Grindr, the popular gay dating app, was actually owned by a Chinese company. I believe it was in around 2015. And the United States was concerned about espionage and the Chinese Communist Party using it to track certain users that are closeted, to blackmail them or things like that, use it for really nefarious purposes. And they were able to successfully force sale pretty quickly. It was pretty seamless. And I think that what we saw there is they were acting as more as a normal company there, because there is so much, the market, being able to play in the US market is so, there's so much money in that. So the idea that, so they acted like a normal company and complying with the forced sale, because they would have been losing out on so much revenue and profit by leaving the United States. TikTok not doing that sends an interesting signal to me, and seems to suggest to me that there are purposes beyond profit as a normal company for it existing as part of ByteDance.
Okay, so Congress passes a law and Joe Biden signs that law, but then says he's not going to enforce the law that he just signed?
That's exactly right. And I think that, right, and the law was said so again. The law said that TikTok had to divest by January 19th or be banned in the United States. And there was a provision that said it could be delayed if by, I believe it was 90 days. It was 90 days. If TikTok could show significant progress of entering into a deal to divest. They were not able to do that because they had not been making progress at all. But then Joe Biden went on the last day of his presidency, said he would enforce it anyway, saying he would leave it to the next administration. I'm like, look, it's like, again, this is a law passed by Congress. It was signed by the president and reaffirmed by the Supreme Court unanimously. Whether you like it or not, or whether you, feel the pressure because you think, there's going to be a backlash among some young people. It's the law now. The way to change that is another act of Congress. And it sets a really bad precedent to just not enforce the law.
Yeah, and so Donald Trump has saved us all from a problem he created, which I think is going to be a big theme during his presidency. He comes in and says, I'm not going to enforce this law. They have like a certain time period, right? So where are we at now with TikTok? Because did they shut themselves down on January 19th in sort of a show? That's how I understood it, even though it wasn't going to be enforced. And then, in order to help Trump, what was that about? What was the actual closing of the app?
It's a little. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying, what was that all about? Why shut yourselves down and then thank President Trump publicly? It seemed odd.
Right. And we don't know for sure. It does sound like it may be a political thing. But it's interesting because there has been different reactions, because there's kind of two elements to this. There's the allowance of being on the App Store, and then the allowance to operate in the U.S. So we've seen that, yes, it shut down for however many hours, less than 24 hours. Then it was back up by the morning. They sent the message that Trump had been able to negotiate something, and it did come back online. However, still today, Apple and Google do not allow TikTok on the app stores because, as Tom Cotton pointed out, failure to comply with the law can risk up to I think they're fines in the 800 billions. I mean, that's emerging a trillion. So it's massive fines by not complying with the law. And he made it clear, even as on Sunday, as there were talk of a potential executive order, Tom Cotton did make clear on Twitter. He made a statement saying that the deadline has passed. There's no other chance for an extension because that chance was before January 19th. That was the deadline. They did not show any evidence of significant progress toward a divestiture. So if there is going to be a negotiation going forward, it has to happen with the ban in place. That doesn't mean that TikTok still can't divest from ByteDance and then come back online. But the law says now the ban should be in place, and there's no room in the law for an extension by the president at this point.
Okay, so you can't download it in the apps, in the app stores, those directories. They've decided to comply with the law. ByteDance, by all measures, doesn't seem like they're trying to sell. So we're in this weird place now. Basically, what you're saying, where TikTok gets to choose: do I listen to the president and their executive order, or do I listen to Congress? And they seem to be going with the president, which seems like a really bad precedent for the future of the rule of law.
Right. That's exactly right. And I mean, again, whether you agree with the forced sale or not in TikTok, it was passed by Congress overwhelmingly, by the way, signed by the president and firm unanimously by the Supreme Court. Can you imagine if down the line it's future presidents just any law? I mean, imagine something really overarching with emissions regulations or things of that nature, which we've kind of seen before, but really setting up the precedent more for presidents just to ignore laws that were put in place before they were president. I just think that sets a really bad precedent for the future and setting up future offices to really overreach in their executive power.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that Republicans are forgetting, that we all said back during the Obama years. Well, just wait till, hey, Democrats, just wait till there's a Republican. Now the Republican is using the executive power and expanding it to do what they want. Well, that's going to swing back and can all be undone. But the rule of law really seems to be on the ropes right now. And I think, why is it important for us? What is the rule of law? I mean, real basic, in a basic definition of why is it important? Why is this concerning to you, this TikTok ignoring of the law?
Right. Well, I think that, first, I think our Constitution is the greatest document ever written. I think the separation of powers are so important to our system of government and keeping each branch in check. So to see Congress pass a law and it be signed, and then for the president to just ignore it, really sets a dangerous precedent for again, executive power being abused or executive overreach, and the separation of powers like Congress and the Supreme Court just being ignored. I think that's such really dangerous precedents for lawmaking in the future. I mean, who knows what laws could just be ignored? It could be anything. If this is able to stand and not challenged, then future presidents are going to continue to think that they can just pick and choose which laws they want to enforce.
Which they can't, but who can stop them? I think that's the problem.
Well, that's exactly right. And our institutions are only as strong as the people behind them. And if we're not seeing, Congress or the courts flex their muscle, as you will, in reaffirming that, hey, this is the law. We hope they can even say hey, and a lot of members of Congress have said, hey, we don't want to see TikTok banned. We do hope there's a forced sale, but this is the law right now. They have to, and if there's going to be something negotiated, the ban still has to be in place because, again, that's the law. If they want to change that, they can go back to Congress, but they haven't done that. So right now, it's the duty of the executive to enforce the law.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to point out that this was Biden and Trump doing it. This is not just Trumpism run amok. This is a bipartisan decision from both parties to pass the TikTok ban in Congress and both parties to ignore it in the presidency.
Well, right. And I think Biden set the precedent here. In a way, Trump kind of continued it, but he still has time to make it right. he could rescind that executive order and still negotiate a forced sale of TikTok. And to be honest, I think it puts the U.S. into a stronger position to negotiate that with the ban in place when they know that we're serious about this and that they're risking the whole U.S. market. And that'll be the true test of, do they want the U.S. market for the profit that it comes with, or do they want to be in the U.S. market for other nefarious reasons?
All right, Ed Tarnowski, where can people follow you if they want to learn more and follow the story?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, please follow me on Twitter at Tarnowski. And if you want to check out any of my work over at EdChoice, go to edchoice.org. Of course, all of my opinions are my own and not representative of my employer at EdChoice, but please check out my work. I hope to see you guys soon.
All right. And plug your podcast. Are you still doing your podcast?
I am. So at EdChoice, I am the host of the State of Choice podcast. About at least monthly, we put out episodes, and we're going to be having guests to talk about choice issues. We're giving state updates on, because our whole team is spread out across the states, analyzing and helping advance choice across the country. So we'll give updates on the progress of choice, but also have guests on to talk about how choice can be improved and what we're seeing across the country and different ways to empower families, things like that. So we're really ramping up that podcast more. So definitely give it a listen.
Yeah, love EdChoice. It's based here in Indianapolis, I think, and I know people like Robert Enlow, Leslie Heiner, and a lot of the people that you work with, and it's a great organization, and people should definitely look into EdChoice. It's edchoice.org. I know that you're not here representing your employer, but want to give them a plug, especially the great Robert Enlow, who I need to have on.
I love it. You should definitely have Robert on. Robert and Leslie are some of the greatest. And I did live in Indianapolis for 2 years for EdChoice. It is a great city. And I have to say, I always say it's very underrated architecturally, especially. It had one of the same designers as Washington, D.C., and it has beautiful monuments. And but no, it's a great city, and EdChoice is a great organization. So I hope you guys will go check it out.
All right, Ed Tarnowski, thanks for being my guest.
Thanks for having me on.